be an American today is to live inside a paradox. A nation born from rebellion now fears dissent, a land of freedom wrapped tightly in invisible constraints. The American identity, once carved in the stone of revolution, industry, and individualism, is no longer solid. It is in flux, no longer inherited. It must now be interpreted. Every citizen becomes both historian and myth-maker, forced to navigate a sea of competing truths. What it means to be American depends on where you stand, who you listen to, and which parts of the past you choose to remember or erase. In this environment, clarity is rare and dangerous. The old symbols, the flag, the eagle, the anthems still fly high, but their meanings are under siege. One man salutes them with pride, another kneels in protest. Each sees the other as blind. Each believes they are fighting for the soul of the nation. But the truth is more disquieting. The soul is fragmented, and the fragments are at war. The very idea of a unified American identity is becoming a relic, something whispered about in classrooms or wrapped in the soft language of political speeches. But on the streets, in the discourse, in the quiet moments of internal reflection, Americans are not unified. They are searching, grasping, sometimes screaming to be seen and understood. This is not a sign of decline. It is a sign of transformation, but transformation is painful. It demands a letting go, and America, built on the mythology of permanence, of destiny, of exceptionalism, resists letting go. The result is anxiety, anger, even hysteria. The political becomes personal. Every disagreement becomes existential. The public square becomes a battlefield where reason is a casualty and identity is weaponized. People don't just argue policies, they defend realities. They are not trying to persuade, they are trying to survive. Within this chaos, a new kind of American is emerging, adaptable, skeptical, alert, no longer convinced that the system works for them, no longer trusting the inherited scripts. They rewrite their own. They do not pledge allegiance to the flag blindly. They dissect it, question it, burn it metaphorically or literally, depending on what it represents to them. They search for tribe in a nation that promised unity but delivered division. And still they persist. This persistence not in ideology, but in the willingness to question, to evolve, may be the closest thing to a true American spirit that remains intact. To be American today is to be watched and watching, judged and judging. Social media becomes a mirror and a mask. Performative patriotism thrives, while quiet dissent hides in digital corners. You are free to speak, but every word may be captured, twisted, weaponized. Surveillance is no longer just from the state, it is from each other. In this environment, power is subtle and dispersed. Control no longer comes from the top down, it seeps in through culture, expectation, fear of exclusion. You are told to be free, but only in the right ways. You are told to be yourself, but only if yourself fits the current mood. The individual is praised but rarely protected. Amid all this, the myths endure. The dream of America, its innovation, its resilience, its boundless ambition still seduces. But even dreams evolve. The question now is not what it means to be American, but who gets to decide. Is it the founders long dead, their words etched in parchment and contradiction? Is it the corporations that sell freedom as a product? Is it the people fractured, furious, and still dreaming? There is no clear answer, only the tension of competing truths and the pressure to choose a side. Perception is the true currency of power in America today. It is not what is, but what appears to be that governs the minds of the masses. Reality, in its raw form, has lost its authority. It is perception crafted, curated, and controlled that determines value, status, morality, and even truth. To be American today is to live inside a hall of mirrors where every reflection has an agenda and every surface is a battlefield. In this terrain, those who understand perception are not merely surviving, they are shaping the future. The most dangerous illusion is that perception is passive, that it comes to us neutrally. In truth, it is molded before it reaches our consciousness. The media, the algorithms, the language of the moment all bend perception toward certain conclusions. You do not see the world as it is. You see it as someone else needs you to. And yet, people cling to their perceptions with the zeal of religious converts. They defend their interpretations as absolute, not realizing that their very lens was handed to them, assembled piece by piece through repetition, fear, and emotional manipulation. Perception is power because it moves behavior. It tells you who to trust and who to fear. It shapes the enemy before you even meet them. It makes injustice look normal and corruption appear sophisticated. Those who can master perception can paint villains as heroes and fools as visionaries. They understand that truth is malleable in the public imagination, and they wield that insight with surgical precision. They do not seek to inform, they seek to influence, to implant narratives that spread like viruses, unchallenged because they feel true, even if they are not. Americans today are inundated with images, headlines, and slogans that operate not on logic but on instinct. The brain cannot process the flood, so it takes shortcuts. It trusts the familiar, the emotional, the repeated. The result is a population that feels informed while being manipulated. Perception becomes a kind of weapon, soft, subtle, almost invisible, and because it is invisible, it is rarely resisted. People react not to what is in front of them, but to what they believe they are seeing. They cast votes, form alliances, and declare enemies based not on deep knowledge but on shallow impressions. This makes perception one of the most valuable forms of capital. It can be traded, monetized, and weaponized. A reputation can be destroyed in a day. A lie can become history if told with enough conviction. A movement can rise or collapse depending on how it is framed. The public has been trained to respond to surface, to symbols, to signals. Authenticity is mimicked by style. Depth is replaced with certainty. Those who grasp this learn to manipulate optics with the skill of an illusionist. They do not need to win the argument, they only need to win the moment. But the hidden power of perception cuts both ways. Just as it can be used to dominate, it can also be used to resist. Those who awaken to its mechanics begin to see beyond the spectacle. They ask what is being concealed, what is being sold, who benefits from the illusion. They begin to turn perception against itself, disrupting the narratives that once defined them. In a society obsessed with image, refusing to conform becomes a kind of rebellion. Silence becomes a weapon. Presence becomes a statement. The most subversive act is not to shout, but to see clearly. To navigate American life today without understanding perception is to walk blindfolded through a minefield. Every word, every gesture, Every affiliation is scrutinized through the lens of how it looks rather than what it means. Those who fail to shape their own perception are shaped by others. They become characters in someone else's story, reacting rather than acting, consumed rather than consuming. The battlefield is psychological, and the front line is in the mind of every individual. Mastering perception is not about deception, it is about reclaiming the power to define your own reality. In a world where everyone else is trying to define it for you, freedom, in the American imagination, is a birthright, a self-evident truth inscribed in sacred documents and reinforced through centuries of myth. But the brutal reality is that freedom is not a gift. It is a burden, a discipline, a set of demands that most are unwilling to meet. To be truly free is not to simply choose without consequence, but to bear the weight of choice with awareness, with restraint, and with an almost ruthless honesty about one's own limitations. In a culture obsessed with liberty, few understand that unchecked freedom leads not to empowerment, but to decay. Without discipline, freedom becomes chaos. Without mastery, it becomes a weapon turned inward. The American notion of freedom has been hollowed out and repackaged. It is now confused with indulgence, with the right to do whatever feels good in the moment. This infantilized version of liberty flatters the ego and seduces the undisciplined. But true freedom demands self-governance. It requires the ability to say no to one's impulses, to delay gratification, to stand apart from the herd when the herd moves blindly. It is not merely the absence of control from above, but the presence of control from within. And this kind of control is rare. It is forged, not found. A free society cannot survive on rights alone. It needs rituals, constraints, and an internal code. Otherwise, liberty degenerates into license, and the social fabric begins to tear. The illusion of freedom becomes a mask for addiction to comfort, to distraction, to outrage. People consume what they are told to consume, believe what aligns with their feelings, and mistake convenience for autonomy. They call themselves free while they live in mental cages, unable to question the forces that shape their desires. The truth is, most Americans are not free, they are simply unchained. And there is a difference. Discipline in this context is not repression. It is refinement. It is the ability to move through the noise of modern life without being dominated by it. It means crafting your attention, your energy, and your beliefs with intention. In a nation where everyone is encouraged to express, to react, to shout, the disciplined person cultivates silence, listens more than speaks, acts with precision rather than impulse. They are not swayed by trends or ruled by algorithms. Their freedom is rooted in structure, a structure they build and protect with care. Freedom as a discipline also means understanding the consequences of power. The freer you become, the more your actions ripple through the lives of others. Power without discipline is tyranny in disguise. A free people who lack self-awareness will inevitably seek control over others to compensate for the chaos within themselves. They will demand conformity, silence dissent, and destroy complexity in favor of certainty. And all of it will be done in the name of freedom. This is the paradox that haunts the American experiment, that liberty can become its own prison when unmoored from responsibility. The disciplined mind does not fear freedom, it respects it. It recognizes that to be free is to be responsible for your own narrative, to write your own code, and to live by it even when no one is watching. This kind of freedom is not loud. It does not demand validation. It is quiet, powerful, and often invisible. It manifests in how one speaks, how one moves, how one chooses their battles. It is not reactive but deliberate, not chaotic but composed. It does not seek to dominate others, only to master the self. To treat freedom as a discipline is to return it to its highest form, not as a tool of comfort, but as a path to sovereignty. It is the refusal to be ruled by fashion, fear, or external command. It is the cultivation of strength in the invisible places in thought, in attention, in will. And in a world that rewards distraction and punishes depth, this kind of freedom is revolutionary. It is earned, not declared, lived, not displayed, quiet, but absolute. To reclaim freedom in its truest form, one must embrace the weight it carries, not as a flag to wave or a slogan to chant, but as a daily practice of mastery over self, over desire, over fear. In a nation saturated with noise and illusion, where liberty is often reduced to spectacle, the disciplined individual becomes a rare force, unshaken by opinion, unmoved by distraction, and unbound by the shallow expectations of the age. Freedom without discipline is a mirage. Discipline without freedom is a cage. But together they form the foundation of something enduring, not just the freedom to act, but the freedom to become. This is the higher calling of the American spirit, and the silent challenge that remains for anyone who dares to be truly free.